Pandora's box, floodgates, unprecedented. These are just a few of the terms used to argue the implications of what it would mean if you had absolute presidential immunity.
To authorize the prosecution of a president for his official acts would open a Pandora's box from which this nation may never recover.
So this notion that we're all of a sudden going to see a floodgate, I think the careful investigations in the Clinton era didn't result in any charges. The fact that this investigation did doesn't reflect that we are going to see a sea change of vindictive tit for tat prosecutions in the future. I think it reflects the fundamentally unprecedented nature of the criminal charges here.
So the real question, could this case unleash political prosecution, persecution, as John Lauro argues when it comes to Donald Trump? Let's talk to Congressman Glenn Ivey, a Democrat out of Maryland. He is a member of the House Judiciary Committee. He also served as counsel to Senator Paul Sarbanes during the Whitewater investigations as well. Always glad to have you here, Congressman. Thank you. Look, I hate to exhaust this term, Pandora's box, but it's been used so much today. I'm going to ask you about it. One side says it will open Pandora's box if you don't give Trump or presidents immunity. The other side saying, no, you have to close it by withholding immunity for actions that are criminal. Who's right here?
Well, I mean, I think you have to make sure that you have some criminal responsibility. I think the arguments that Trump's lawyers made today were just way farther than they needed to go and hit the point of being a bit ridiculous, frankly. And that's why they were so vulnerable to the extreme scenarios, the hypotheticals like, SEAL Team 6 killing the rival. But, I do think that there's going to continue to be some level of immunity for presidents and every other public official, including like police officers who are doing things in their official duties, as long as they're acting in the proper capacity and the proper role. In the Trump scenario, you just have conduct after conduct after conduct that is, way beyond the scope of, frankly, almost any other presidency has presented to the country. And that's why he's got 91 criminal charges over his head, as well as a couple of civil verdicts against him as well. So I think he's a bad case to try and use to try and set limits on presidential immunity, I think.
I like your example in terms of law enforcement, because you're right to point out when most of the conversations up till now have been about immunity for somebody who is, a law enforcement official or a member of the executive branch, which under obvious law enforcement falls, you talk about qualified immunity or otherwise. We recognize that there are times that official acts should never be prosecuted.
Right.
Then there's times when somebody has gone rogue, and trying to decipher when it's official, when it's not, is the crux of this issue. Is this something that you think is clear to the courts, or what are the rules in terms of what is presidential behavior and what is campaigning behavior and what is, as he says, I'm just trying to faithfully execute the laws and enforce them because I think there's voter fraud?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue at some level is something that all elected officials deal with, because we all have lines that we can't cross. For example, for campaign conduct or political activities, you have to keep those separate from official activities. If you're a member of Congress, if you're a governor, if you're the dog catcher, you have to keep it separated out. And the presidency, I think it should be even easier to do, because he has entire staffs around the campaigns and the presidential office to help you draw those lines, to make sure that you don't cross them. In the case of President Trump, frankly, I think he wanted to cross those lines and didn't even think about them in many instances. And that's why he's in the deep trouble that he's in.
Well, you mentioned a former president. There is the current president, Biden, and of course a member of his own cabinet, Mayorkas, as well, who we can think of another word, impeachment. You've got an impeachment inquiry when it comes to Biden. You've got impeachment looming over Secretary Mayorkas as well. Some have argued that Democrats opened a kind of Pandora's box by having back-to-back impeachments of Trump in, 2 years over time, in an era when we never actually had them for longer periods of time. When you look at what Trump is saying about, kind of be careful what you wish for. If it's happening to me now, it could be Biden next for things like the border and beyond. Do you have concerns that if immunity is not granted here, and say the election goes Trump's way, what's next is Biden under that microscope?
I don't think it matters for Donald Trump. I think he'll do whatever he wants to do, regardless of the precedents. I think we saw in his first term that he was willing to break with history, tradition, norms, and the law repeatedly. So I don't think that's the right way to try and draw the line. I do think the difference, though, is, if you're doing something, for example, the Mayorkas case, there's basically they don't agree with his policies at the border. There's no allegation that he's committed bribery, treason, high crimes, misdemeanors, anything like that. Same thing with President Biden. They don't like the things that Hunter Biden's done, and they keep trying to tag the president with those, but they've been unsuccessful. And the interesting thing, at the beginning of the impeachment hearings with respect to President Trump, they brought on a panel of experts to inquire about it. The House Republicans did, and all three experts said, you don't have enough here to impeach. There's not enough evidence. One of those same experts, Jonathan Turley, sent a letter today for the Mayorkas hearing that starts tomorrow and said the same thing. You don't have enough evidence to impeach Mayorkas. The fact is that there's just not evidence to do it in these cases, whereas I think the misconduct connected to President Trump is pretty clear cut. And in fact, could it be more clear cut than January 6th? I mean, if you had a TV and you were watching that, what else could you think? I mean,
Well, you're going to believe me or your lying eyes, right? That's what it comes down to. Jonathan Turley, of course, a professor at George Washington University who's been relied on in a number of conservative circles to try to flesh out these issues. Is Mayorkas, they have the votes to impeach him?
We'll see. I know that they've got moderate Republicans in President Biden districts that President Biden won. They're worried about losing those guys, and if they do, we'll retake the House. It's a totally political calculation at the end of the day for the House Republicans. That's how they're going to have to decide it. But, when it gets to the Senate, they're not going to impeach him anyway, or they're not going to remove him anyway.
Well, a lot of reverse engineering, trying to look for those high crimes and misdemeanors. I remember a time it had to come first, the horse, then the cart, right? But we'll see. Congressman Glenn Ivey, nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.